I'm Sasha Nicole.
And I'm Star.
And I'm Dr. T.
And this is Amerikan Therapy, the definitive podcast on all things Black mental health. We are back, as always, in our virtual, room. We've been enjoying our time pivoting through this pandemic, and we are still continuing to give you great content. Star, what are we talking? Well, first, we got to talk about my new haircut. Y'all see that?
Let's keep it real. Everybody noticed right away.
Right. Y'all, so I got a haircut through the pandemic, and it was open. Phase one. I just want everybody to know I didn't do nothing that was illegal, and I feel really good. So I'm excited. This is a good day for me.
Oh, great.
So, Star, what are we talking about today?
All right, because that haircut is everything, by the way. So today, okay, we know it's been a rough couple of weeks and months, and it just seemed like it's hitting us hard. So today we're going to talk about, because everybody's got kids or has children, young people in their lives. So how do we help them communicate and manage the tragedy of all of the racial oppression and COVID. When you thought COVID was the worst thing, and then now all of this videotape trauma. So how do we help our children navigate that, communicate that, and engage in their feelings?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So today we have Miss Alexis Alton. Alexis has been working with children, adults, and families for more than 15 years to improve behaviors and relationships while educating and providing therapeutic support. Alexis' journey began at Westchester University, where she received a bachelor's degree in social work, and then went on to further hone her skills at Howard University, earning a master's degree in social work. Her passion is to reach and help as many people learn to control their lives and focus on their life's purpose. In 2018, she created an activity workbook called How I Can Control My Feelings in 30 Days to teach young people self-control in a fun and creative way. Well, I'm an adult and I still need help controlling my feelings.
I think I need that too.
I hear that a lot.
Welcome, Alexis. We're really happy to have you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now we're going to get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it.
So with all the stuff that's going on I was good all week. And today with everything happening with the police shooting, police killing, so many of them, with it's just too much. I'm overwhelmed. So I can't imagine what young people are feeling in the midst of, here they've been locked in the house for, I don't know how many days, it's been 70 days now. And now on top of that, their life got turned upside down. And now it's like, okay, so it's open season on Black people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do we do? Help.
So I work with teenagers in DC. And honestly, their response, I think at this point, they're really desensitized to kind of everything. And
I just got a text literally 20 minutes before we got on here, because you're in DC, and it's from the mayor's office. Apparently, the kids are attacking the police. There was just an incident where 30 or 40 kids just were like, we're done.
Yeah, so I think that they're the way that they're processing through it is that they're not gonna either it just doesn't affect them. They think it doesn't affect them in any way, or they're not gonna let it continue to happen. But just kind of some of the conversations that I've had, it's almost like it's just becoming so much of a norm to them, and unfortunately, it's just kind of. It's just like it's another incident. And what you were saying earlier, it's hard for even us as adults to even process through it. I was having a tough time, and just, it affects us all, and if you're not affected, that's an issue,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my job, to really help them through it, and for them to even understand that, they do have feelings about it. It is an issue, and that they should process through it appropriately.
And I would remind everyone that what a kid is feeling and how they're able to express those feelings is going to be very dependent on how old they are. Younger kids might show it through their behaviors. They might not want to eat. They might have problems sleeping. They might be more agitated or have, get more aggressive, or just stuff that's out of the norm because they don't have language yet. Yeah. Even older kids in early childhood to middle childhood who do have language, I mean, as we've all said, this is hard to figure out, hard to understand, and hard to swallow one more pill. Mm-hmm. And so you may see regression. So older kids may start doing things that they used to do when they were younger. You could see thumb sucking, you could see bedwetting, you could see stuff that, and you're just like, where is this coming from? Well, they don't have any way to express what we don't have as adults, right? So they don't have ways for sure how to express it. So if you see a change in your child's behavior from their baseline, that's really when it's time to think about helping them figure out how to express whatever it is that they're struggling to express.
Yeah, that's a good point. Also, shutting down, loss of pleasure in some of the activities that they used to do, but just being in the room a lot, not wanting to talk, those are just always kind of red flags that you should really look to, just have more of a conversation, or if necessary, always seek help for them. But yeah, it could be the opposite of either they're acting out and trying to fight the police. If they're older, I mean, I guess if they're younger too, that could be an issue, or a way that they express themselves. But even the older ones, the opposite could be them really shutting down, trying to harm themselves, feeling like life is too much, and they feel like, what can they do? So those are kind of all of the different things, that the behaviors that the older kids can go through.
So Alexis, tell us about the workbook that you created and how you can control your emotions, because, I know I jokingly said, well, I need a workbook like that, but honestly, I think that would be helpful. My mother used to always talk about, needing a higher emotional intelligence.
Right.
And I think that that's something, that many adults still struggle with. And so I know you wrote that in a fun and creative way to help with kids. So talk to us about what that is, and kind of what's a little bit in the book, or what are some tactics that, we can use to help control our feelings?
Sure. So the book was really created out of necessity. Like I said, I've been working in DC for quite some time, and always had to really modify different assignments or activities, and just kind of some of the resources that are out there. I've had to modify for our youth to really engage and see themselves in it. So it was created out of necessity. So, and one of the things that I felt like, all kids need to learn is really how to express themselves, how to identify how they feel. So in the book, they learn 20 feeling words, such as angry, irritated, frustrated, confused. I mean, I tried to really pick ones that aren't their traditional feelings that they would identify with. And then there's just small tasks for them to complete each day, for them to learn about that feeling, process through it, and then be able to really utilize what they've learned after even the 30 days. The book is designed for somebody for the child that doesn't have someone to do the book with them, because I know that's always a possibility. I mean, before this pandemic, parents are working a lot, or just not giving the individual attention to the young people. So it is created in the sense where they can really do the small tasks and be able to then show someone that they trust and that they feel like is a safe person, is a safety plan inside the book that was needed. I'm just thinking of my work and how we have to have that anyway. So just some of the activities include where they have to talk about, like a confused moment, and they have to figure out, is this something that is being confused okay? To really normalize, or just for them to understand that the feelings that they do have are.
Alexis, why are the feeling words so important? Because I think about when I was a kid, and even now, right? It's hard to be like, you hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
I don't like you, you being stank, you being,
Right. Well, it's really, it's important because they have to be able to communicate. And of course, what you were talking about earlier is adults, if you feel like you don't know how to do that because you never learned it as a child. You just get older. So it's just being able to communicate with people and let them know how you're feeling, and having that language to be able to do that. So that's what the book, and there's over 50 activities. So it just keeps it really fun and engaging. Like you said in the beginning, there's 5 games that is included in the back, just so that they can be rewarded. It just really gives them an opportunity to really empower themselves, to keep themselves going.
You have a copy of the book with you?
I do.
Oh yeah, I want to see that.
I do have the book with me. So
Let's
this is
get
the
it on
book.
Amazon. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
I love that. So let's open it up. Let's do one of the, you said there's 50 activities. Let's do
here are the feeling words.
You on my wavelength.
All right. So what they have to do on here, let's just go over this. So they have to draw a triangle around how you feel right now. Okay. Even if they don't understand some of the words, that comes next. So draw a circle around the feelings you have felt before, draw a triangle around the feeling you have never felt, and then draw a square around the feelings you do not understand. So then when I talked about the small tasks that they have to complete, or I call it further practice, basically homework assignments, but I called it further practice. And then they got to Google the words that they did not know and then write them in the notes section in the back.
So like if I was saying today, like I know today I was feeling, I was on a phone call with Steny Hoyer's office, right? And I was getting angry. I found myself overwhelmed. So I was angry, and then my eyes started to well up, and I was like, and I never cry. I never cry. And Sasha's laughing because it's like,
no, you do not cry often.
I don't cry. I barely cried at my mom's funeral. I mean, I broke down at the end, but barely. So I'm not a crier because I was conditioned and taught, and I was raised around Black women who did not cry, who were like, man up, tough it up. Life is hard on us. And so I found myself, I was talking and I got choked up. And it hit me like out of way left field, and I was just like, so I was angry, and then I got angry because, I don't know if I was angry because I was crying or just the situation. But I was angry and I was just overwhelmed. So, okay, if I circle angry and overwhelmed, now what do I do next?
So that is just for that. I mean, I can tell you what you could have done next, but this is...
Okay, well, tell Star what she should have done next. I want to hear it.
So basically, really identifying how you feel at that moment. You can always feel like angry, overwhelmed. You can feel sad. You can feel frustrated because you weren't able to kind of get your words out. So really just identifying how you felt. And then really thinking about it, taking kind of a step back to figure out, how should I respond to this? Should I, what you were overwhelmed because of, what was it?
I was overwhelmed because I was asked, it was a conversation about what's going on right now, and we're trying to come up with a policing plan. And then I was just like, well, you got a plan. There was a plan in 2014.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
It was Attorney Griggs gave us, and I was like, hold up, but you had, like, they want to redo studies, and we need a task force.
Okay.
And I was like, hold up, time out. And that's when I got angry and overwhelmed because I was like, okay, hold up, this exists. Why are we playing games here? Right. We know what the problem is. And so I just like, it caught me in my throat, and I was like, oh, I'm about to cry.
So taking a step back, figuring out how you can respond appropriately in that given situation with the times that we're living in. Sometimes saying that in the way that they can understand it is going to be necessary, because we cannot continue just kind of spinning the wheel when we've tried and done all of the different things, and of course it's not going to work because it's not designed to work in a sense. But for the kids, I really have them really take a step back, figuring out how you feel, respond accordingly, and then, or like thinking about like, what do you want to get out of this situation, and then thinking about the consequences. So for my teenagers, their first option is always to fight, and I have to get them to really understand that if you do fight, what will be then the consequences if you try to do other things, other options to be able to get out your feelings or at least process through them, then how can that then benefit you? One of the things that I try to really get them to understand is really to turn your pain into some type of purpose, like figuring out, yes, I feel this way, but then how can I get somebody to either hear me? How can I feel better? How can I X, Y, and Z so that I can still maintain my goal of whatever it is.
And Star,
Wait, Dr. T, what do
I
you
was
think?
about to say, Star, you asked the question of why are feeling words important? And they're important for a lot of reasons. One is because it's a way to communicate what you're experiencing internally. That gives people the opportunity to validate you. That gives people the opportunity to support you. That gives people the opportunity to help you. There's not always something that we can do to take the pain away, but knowing, like Alexis said, that it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling is a huge thing for most kids. I mean, kids want to please adults. And so for them to have words to be able to communicate and you to be able to support them and validate them is just a huge, huge piece of, you know, what this can do. And so anger, like you said, Star, how you felt today is often a secondary emotion. It masks what we're really feeling deep down inside. And so whenever we feel angry, most of the time there's something else underneath. We're hurt, we're disappointed, we're scared, we're sad, but we're too vulnerable in that situation to talk about those primary emotions. So then the secondary emotion of anger takes over, and then we act out of anger and we never get our primary emotion dealt with. And so learning those words and learning how to recognize them through the exercises like Alexis is talking about is really powerful because it gives you the opportunity to really get your needs met.
Yes, just what you said.
We
Absolutely.
tag teaming today. Come on.
Yep.
So Sasha, like you have a little one, right? And Dr. T, you have like high school kids.
Yeah.
What are y'all going through with them and their emotions right now? Are they even aware of what's going on?
Yeah. So for Zara, I think she's still kind of in an anger phase. So for example, I could be like, well, let's go do this. And she'll be like, for what? Nobody's out there anyway. Mm-hmm. Like she is responding in a very angry way at the fact of her whole world as she knows it has changed. And and so as time has gone on, she'll speak the term, COVID, pandemic, things like that. And it's like, okay, it seems as though maybe it's becoming a little bit of a new normal. But it is still like the concept of not being able to interact she's just not conceptualizing that. The Zoom that her teacher does once, I think every 2 weeks, she gets extremely excited about that to see some of her classmates. And so that has been a little helpful. And then luckily, and this could be against some people, but she's the only small child in the house, and we have a friend of ours who has another small child, and so we eventually ended up texting. And last week the kid came over, and that was a good interaction for her. And so and for me, I am considering putting her in summer camp with it opening, because based upon the needs of my child. Her needs are very interpersonal. I've never seen such a strong need for that before, but it is something that I've noticed when she doesn't have. It's like literally dealing with a different child, and I'm not equipped to deal with that type of kid. Like I'm just not. And so, me and my husband, we try, but it feels as though, and if you have no choice, you do it, but it almost feels as like us working, our frustration levels, her boredom, trying not to have her just on the tablet. I mean, it's literally like a different person. And so, I don't know. I mean, it's been tough, and I've tried to talk to her, and in a 7-year-old's mind, I don't think it's a lot that you can do, to be honest with you. And Dr. T, I mean, you'd have, as a professional in that, you'd have to tell me, but at least in her mind, it don't seem like it's a lot that I can do.
Is she aware of the racial
spectrum?
Is she aware at 7, of the racial tension going on? Or is that like off their radar?
So she's aware only because I talk about it. But she is aware from moments where like she'll come home from school and talk about how she doesn't like President Trump, because kids' parents, I guess we're talking about the president. Or then she'd say something about, former President Obama. Like, she is, as most young children is repeating anything that she hears. She does know what the N word is, because I think me and my husband were talking, I said something and she said, "Hey, I'm standing right here." So she's very adverse to like those type of things, doesn't like cuss words, stuff like that. And I cuss a lot. But as far as like race, like white people are oppressors type of thought, no, I honestly probably forced not that thinking, but I forced the history in her knowing about Black history, because it's just something that they completely ignore in school. She came home from school one time about Thanksgiving, and she was like, "Oh, well, my teacher said the Indians and the Pilgrims were friends," and that pissed me off, to be honest with you, because it just wasn't true. And so I made her watch some YouTube videos about the history of Native Americans, and she was like appalled. And so she'll ask questions like that, but still to the thought or the process of someone may not like me because of my color, she can't believe it. Like, well, what do you mean? Why? I don't understand what you're saying, and I don't believe it.
Yeah, so, you're right. My girls are both in high school, and they're both very creative. And so I think for them, that has been a buffer, because they surround themselves with very creative people who believe in justice and who believe in all of these, kind of things. They're very fortunate to have developed the friendships that they have. But I've noticed and observed, I've watched, I'm, you guys know I'm that mom. So I'm on their social media, I'm on their friends' social media, and all of these kids, regardless of what race or color they are, regardless of what part of the city they live in, they're all posting about justice. They're all posting about, they're writing poems. They're trying to figure out with each other, how do we help each other and what can we do? And so yesterday for my daughter's acting class final, the teacher handed out, this was before this even happened, but she had to record it yesterday. I just thought it was so interesting. They had to do a monologue for their final project, record it and send it in to the teacher. And the monologue was about a girl who was at boarding school and had to leave boarding school and come back home to the city because of COVID-19. And I looked at her final project, and like the pain of having to leave that safe place and go back home. And she was begging her mother to let her stay at the boarding school where she felt safe. And it was, I see my daughter act all the time. She's been acting since she was 7. And I just was like, oh my God, this kid is an Academy Award winning actress. Like, and not just because I'm her mother, but because the pain was real. And all actresses have to get that pain from somewhere, right? And so it made me really think about, like, how is she tapping into that pain? Like, where is that coming from? And it was very powerful. So, that's how a lot of her friends are managing this. My godson is 20, and he's going to be a college senior in the fall. And my cousin told me that he called her last night, and he just wanted to talk for 2 hours in the middle of the night, and just talked and talked and talked and talked. And he was just trying to talk it out. Like, he didn't even have the words. And my cousin is a singer and a songwriter, and she ended up writing a song this morning out of his pain. So I think a lot, we've always been very creative people. I think a lot of people are trying to figure that out. I don't know, I'm sure you guys have seen on Instagram the young boy that is singing about his pain and wanting to be alive. I think that a lot of young people are trying to find creative outlets to express just how difficult this is and trying to process it.
Should we be talking about this stuff with like the young people? Like, how and when and what do we share with like our kids?
So I think that's a great question, because a lot of times as adults, we haven't processed it. So we want to spill onto our kids because it makes us feel better. And so I always remind the adults is you got to process it first so you can meet the child where they are. a kid that's 7 is going to need a different conversation than a kid that's 14 than a kid that's 20. And so if you haven't processed it, you're going to spill over and you could inadvertently do more harm or traumatize the kid again, because you're, really just trying to process it yourself. So it's so important for the adults to take care of themselves, to process what they're feeling, and then meet the kid where they are. Use words that they understand and allow them the space to talk about it. And if they don't want to talk about it, allow them that space too, but maybe help them find some nonverbal ways that they can release that energy and that emotion.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The only thing I would add is, if they're asking questions, if they're coming to you just off of something they might have seen or heard or something like that, that would be a good kind of segue. But yeah, I would definitely meet them where they're at, and go from there.
Alexis, when you're dealing with some of the kids that you work with in DC, and Star and I both being, Star being native to Maryland, for the most part, I've been native to the DMV area, and us seeing the spectrum of kids in and out of DC, and in a clear line of the have and have nots type of kids. When you are encountering these children every day, what are some things that you do to try to relate to them or even get them to listen to you on why it's important to control their emotions?
Well, and I will say this, that the kids that I work with, they want help. So that's always kind of the best, of course, thing. So I'm a therapist out of school. So to get my service, it's a voluntary service. So they're either coming to me or they've been referred, and then I explain to them how the process goes, and then they kind of agree. So that always kind of really starts, and they can really acknowledge and express that they do have some issues with anger, or they do have some issues with grief and loss. And as we kind of get into the process, it really, I really put an emphasis on being able to, like I said before, just have the language and be able to communicate your feelings so that you can process it appropriately, and then begin to heal from whatever is going on. So it really is a big point in, or I should say, just a big portion of the work. I always do different check-ins with them before we start. So I'm always reinforcing, how do you feel today, and making them or having them say, I feel this because of this, just so that they can continue to repeat it even when I'm not asking them. So it is a big part of our work.
Is there a moment where, so now let's transition from an adult perspective, and Dr. T, chime in here too. When you say, I feel this because of this, and then when you think about certain things, like, for example, one of my favorite books, The 4 Agreements, that talk about not taking things personal, how do you measure, how can we as adults be careful in recognizing that we may feel something that doesn't necessarily belong to us? Or, like, for example, someone said they hated my hair, and therefore I internalize this whole thing and create this whole vision of why this person is so bad, or why I hate short hair because of one comment that may have hurt my feelings. Like, how do we differentiate? Like, can you differentiate feelings that are, I don't know if should I say valid or of substance? Like, how do we begin to look at what we're feeling rather than what we may be creating?
That's a great question.
Yeah, it is. So kids, I mean, if they feel it's a problem, or they feel like it's an issue, you just really want to validate their feelings, whether we believe that it's a big enough issue or not, and then really get to the root of, so why do you feel this? Is self-esteem issue, self-worth issue, and then get to the bigger picture of, why they are affected by someone saying that. But really just validating their feelings so that they can be heard. It really is what Dr. T was saying, is to be able, kids are really getting that validation, wanting that validation from adults. So just really saying, basically, I hear you, and how can we then get to the bigger problem, or the root of the issue that you really are facing.
Yeah, and I think, Sasha, it's a really important skill that really it does take late adolescence into young adulthood to begin to differentiate what is somebody else's feeling and what's mine, what's my responsibility to take that in versus learn to shut that out. And so the first question they can ask themselves is that what that person believes, or is that what I feel? And so people can have all kind of opinions about you. And as Black people, we know that's part of the problem we have in this world, is that people have a lot of feelings about us, and people are going to have a lot of feelings about young Black boys and girls that are not valid, that are not based in reality, and certainly not based in any kind of personal experience with that young person. So the more you can shore up their sense of self, helping them know who they are, it's easier for them to begin to ward off all those attacks of who other people expect them to be. But that is a much, that's a higher order kind of level thing. And our kids are in still a lot of survival mode, and they haven't graduated to that. But that is absolutely something that, I try to teach my daughters about, because adolescence is really, even if you're in a really wonderful environment, adolescence is tough, because people are trying to understand who they are, and they don't always reflect that very nicely on other people. And sometimes they use other kids to, make themselves feel better. And so for a young person has to learn how to navigate that, and they need a healthy environment and healthy adults to help them navigate that.
Should we be, like with everything going on right now, I'm going back to me, Star, not, as a professional and all that stuff. I'm like, should we just have our kids in therapy right now? Because I am overwhelmed. And I'm in therapy once a week, been doing that for years. And I am like, this is too much. So should our kids be in therapy? Because I think about how my mother might have responded to me during this. And I shouldn't say I know, but I feel like I was raised with you gotta be tough, and this world's gonna kick your ass if you don't know how to hold it together. But I am overwhelmed, and I am 40 years old.
Alexis, you can go first. I have an opinion about this, but you go first.
Well, I would say if there's a need, if you see that there's a need for your child or young person, just kind of some of the symptoms that we said before, acting out, physically, verbally, shutting down, not talking, just some of the things that are not as normal behaviors that you might have experienced with them. So if you see something that is out of the ordinary, I would recommend getting some type of extra support if you feel like your child would need it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I don't think you would expect a therapist to say therapy isn't for everybody, right? Mm-hmm. You have to want it. You have to be willing to explore it. And everybody's not there at every time. And sometimes I think us as adults, we think the things that are going to work for us are the same things that are going to work for kids. Mm-hmm. And so, like Sasha said, for Zara, she's going to put her in day camp where she can get social interaction, and she can get some positive energy, and she can, be in an environment that makes her feel good. That's probably better for her at this moment than therapy, right? But therapy is great. Don't get me wrong. I think a lot of people should be in therapy.
Dr. C said y'all don't need to go to therapy.
That's what I say. But
I agree.
I think you have to be ready to use therapy, mm-hmm. which means that has to be at that moment a way that you like to communicate. And depending on the young person and depending on the environment, parents get very angry because they'll send a kid to therapy week after week after week. And the kid is just sitting there and not saying anything because they don't want to be there, and they don't know how to use therapy. They're not ready for therapy. So it should be a really decision between you and your child about, is this a good use? And hopefully you have a therapist who's willing to tell you the truth. I'm not sure this is the best for this child at this moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think age really matters, because I know when I had Zara tested for some of the issues we were having, when we finally got into Johns Hopkins to get it reviewed, the doctor there said that, he understands that a lot of people are very against medication, but for certain instances, and we weren't talking about antidepressants, but more so to control the hyper issues that we were having and other things in school, he was saying that at her age there, because I was like, well, shouldn't I just take her to therapy, thinking that maybe this will help fix some of the things that we were dealing with. And he, was like, I feel as though you'd be wasting your time and your money to take her at her age and her inability to process certain things to a therapist right now, because she wouldn't be able to utilize it in a helpful way. He was like, sometimes there's varying circumstances that, you may have to take a child that age to therapy. But in essence of, from a testing result standpoint, his recommendation was that therapy was not going to be effective to her needs.
Yeah. And kids, there are different therapeutic techniques. So no matter what the age of the child, no matter how much verbal ability and processing ability they have, there are ways to use therapy even as young as 4, 5, 6 years old, but it still has to be the right decision for that child.
And you got to be, because, Zara is manipulative. So when she was going to occupational therapy, she looked at it as though she was getting like ice cream. Like she was so excited because she got to play. But once she caught on of like, oh, and looked around at some of the other kids who were there, it's like she began to play us like you wouldn't believe. It was like, what started off as something that could have been helpful, it ended up regressing, because now she was able to manipulate the situation. Like, oh, therapy, we're going to therapy. And so, but we did try that, for at least a year. She went to occupational therapy. And in the beginning, it definitely was helpful in creating some routines and stuff. But so, Alexis, anything that you would want to add, just closing out, that you would say, or that you're doing? What you think?
Well, I mean, I think that self-care is a big part of what we can do to really control our environment, and really thinking about that in that perspective of, there's a lot of things that are out of our control, but really focusing on what we can control is key, and really taking care of self. These are hard times for us all. Like we all kind of talked about, really having like someone to talk to, these platforms to listen to, different podcasts, just really taking time to talk to other people who are going through the same thing. However you feel is good to be able to release some of the tension that we have, or just kind of the emotions that we have right now is key. So I would definitely say that, just kind of like, that's something that we all can do tonight, tomorrow, to really to deal with this. And then really figuring out, how it's going to be best for you and your family. So whatever that looks like, and if that's protection, is that self-defense training, is that learning the law, that going to therapy, whatever it's going to be, to really help you get through it, and to, protect yourself in this world that we're living in, is going to be key. And that's just kind of, just kind of breaking just the ice on just kind of some of the things, but there's definitely a lot more that you can do. But I would say just self-care, and then figuring out, how you and your family can move forward during these times.
Dr. T, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to remind everyone that parenting doesn't end at 18. And so kids of all ages, your 30-year-old child, your 20-year-old child, your 40-year-old child is struggling with this, and they're trying to figure out and have a trusted person to talk to. And so it doesn't matter what age your child is. You might have a 30-year-old child who has a 5-year-old child. And so they may need your support in trying to process it themselves, so that they can help their 5-year-old process it. But all of that begins with, as Alexis said, taking care of yourself. That includes turning off the video. I said repeatedly, I tell everybody who asks, I didn't watch the video. I knew when I saw the picture of the officer's knee on the guy's neck that there was no need for me to watch that video, because I knew what was going to be on it. And so I didn't subject myself to that. And so we have to protect ourselves. We know what's going on. We can use the information, and there's lots of people talking about it. I may as well have watched it, right? But I didn't have the need for myself. I'm not saying anyone who did watch it, that's that if that was their need, that was their need. But let's respect each other's needs and let's protect ourselves so we can help each other through this. And then turn that pain into action. Mm-hmm. Help your child figure out what's an activity you can do. What's something that you can do to feel like you're contributing and being a part of the solution.
Great.
Star, what say you?
I'm still overwhelmed. Honestly, I laugh to keep from crying and to keep going forward. But my only thing I have today is just be present with whatever's going on inside of you. Like, this is rough. And I've been in this meditation and mindfulness and yoga game and this therapy game for a long time, for 10 years now. And I'm off my square. I feel myself off my square. I woke up this morning, and every morning I get up at like around 4:30, and I do my like sun salutations and my meditation and my prayer on my mat. And like this morning, I got up, and all I could do was pray. I was like, I didn't have the energy to get up and do my yoga and to sit still. I was just too like I wasn't right, and all I could do was pray and be like, is this gonna be all right? I don't know. So be present is all I have, and just be honest about what all this stuff that's coming out of the situation. That's all I got today.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I definitely would say, just to circle on what everyone said. I mean, we have to be mindful of what we are breathing and soaking into our spirits, our minds, all of that. Right now, there's so many things going on, and it's tough to deal with. And I think that for me, it's okay to say that I can still focus on certain things and I don't have to receive this end of what's going on. And it doesn't mean that I don't care about what's going on, or doesn't mean that I don't have emotions, but it just means that I have to choose wisely in where I share and spend my emotions at. Mm-hmm. So, similar to what Dr. T said, but, I think overall, just we got to take a look at how we can all, best control and not only help ourselves, but help our children. So Alexis, really appreciate it. Thank you. Show us the book again and where we can find it.
Yeah, so this is the book, How I Control My Feelings in 30 Days. It's out on Amazon, or you can go to my website, www.alexisalton.com.
Good, thank you. And follow us, Amerikan Therapy, all platforms, that's with a K, and check us out, and we out.
Thank you for having me.